And it's really important that you're the one working through this right now. You know what I mean? Like, I could take the leash and I mean, I'm sure he'd still do the same shit and I would work through it and all that kind of stuff, but I don't want him developing the association of I won the battle with him. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to at this point, because that's the problem you ran into last time, right?
Oh, look at this bug. That's a cool looking bug. Look, it's cool. Let's get this guy out.
Okay. Scout, okay.
Oh, he was holding the bed stay.
Yeah, he was on bed.
Oh, look at you, buddy.
He's very, very excited to
yes.
see Mr. Good. Come on in.
He was just holding a bed stay. He just got released.
So this is one thing that we're not sure about how to deal with him. I'm kind of like semi-okay with it to a point, but then he gets to where he's like smacking you with the legs and stuff, and he's just really excited.
Right.
But I also don't want him knocking guests over.
It depends on the situation. You know, if it's something that there is an older guest over or something like that, or a younger guest, and you're worried about him knocking him over, it's fine if he is holding that bed stay or that down or the crate or whatever, you know. It's something that because again, the point of it is to kind of like help calm him down a little bit. And so that might be the whole time the guests are over. That might be until he starts to pass out, you know, whatever. But
he does like calm down at some point, but
but he is a little
just like, hey,
wagging India. Yeah.
So just piggybacking off that real quick, so a couple things. One, with the bed stays in particular, one thing I always tell everybody is a lot of times we make the mistake and we have the dog hold the bed stay for like 1 to 2 minutes, right? And he does fine with it, right? But at that point, his arousal of like, oh my god, somebody's here, is still on like a level 11, right? Generally speaking, when I have guests come over, I still do a bed stay every time they come over, but I'll do like 10 to 15 minutes, right? And what that does is that allows the energy to like really come down, right? People can get themselves settled. He's seen them there for a little bit. All that excitement of, oh my god, you know, my favorite person's here or whatever, kind of comes down a little. So when you go to release him, it's not so intense then at that point. And then like Seamus was saying, like depending on who's over will depend on how long I keep him there or if I release him at all. Like we just had, you know, my 86-year-old grandmother-in-law over, and we didn't let the dogs run around when she was out, right?
Probably a good idea. With the dog, especially if they're like him.
Exactly, right? And then the other side of things is just once we release him, controlling the arousal level a little bit, where the reason why he's settling now is because he's realizing he's not getting anything. We're not getting him all jacked up. It's not like as soon as we release him off, people are like, oh my god, Scout, we're so excited to see you. You know what I mean? So kind of controlling that side of the spectrum will also help it not be so intense when they're released.
Okay, so like really maybe don't pet him until he's sort of like calmed down. And
really let that energy just like go off for a little bit. So, but yeah, he's not doing anything wrong. So really what we have to do is we have to just control the excitement overall a little bit through managing with the command for a little bit longer, obviously. And then once we release him off, making sure we're not giving him a reason to get so excited once he gets off.
Got it. Okay.
David, how do you want to work through this? I guess
the crate stuff?
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at it first.
Okay.
Let's see how he gets in and out of it, how he is if we just put him in there and close the door while we're in here, stuff like that. Why don't you just show us kind of what your crate routines are?
Okay.
You told him to get off of the couch. Is that a rule that you guys have with him? Is no furniture?
I don't mind him being on the furniture, but I don't want him up on the arms and on the back.
I understand. Was he up on the back
of
of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So with off is like off seems to work for him, but
well, that's going to be another thing I was going to say is a lot of times when the dog is really excited like this, what I try to do is I try to capitalize on little mistakes to give new boundaries and corrections. So that's something, if that's a forever rule, which obviously it is, of him not getting on the back, I would have actually corrected for that.
Okay.
Instead of used off. Because off will work in the moment. It'll be like, all right, I get off now. But then next time when he gets too excited and then gets up there, he knows he can do it until he hears off, right?
Got it. Okay. Oh, okay. So instead of it being a command to get off, it's a no. Correction. Okay.
Yeah, no different than if he jumped on somebody. That's something he's never allowed to do, so we're not going to use a command for it to stop it in the moment. We're going to use a correction to stop it altogether.
So when it comes to creating with him, he's really, really good about getting in.
Sure.
Scout. Great. Oh, okay. He's totally good. Like he'll stay in here. I can close him in here. He's totally fine with this. He's totally fine with it as long as we're like in the house. So like I can leave the room, it's fine. And as soon as he hears like a door close, gone? Like.
So last time we just went out here in the back porch
Yep.
and just kind of hung out.
And when you were hanging out back there, was he like barking or anything in it? Or?
So yeah, that's kind of we were what I kind of left off with last follow-up is correcting for vocalization.
Yeah.
And just trying to kind of work on that to bring it down.
Yeah, because you can hear already, like we're here, he's getting himself worked up in there.
Yep.
So, okay. And why don't you go ahead and open the door, let him out for a second, and I want to start with one other piece of the puzzle here first. Okay. Oh, very good.
Okay.
Okay, so what I want you to do is you're going to put him in the crate, but don't close the door, and I want to see how well he holds it with the door open just first. So let me ask you this while we're doing this. How often do you use the crate with him?
So, Nicole doesn't like it as much as I do because of the reactions that we're having, and so we've kind of tried to figure out a way to do to have him behave that we want to, the way we want to without the crate.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to end up working because there's like times where we'll come down and like, in this room, or like he's chewed something up or something like that, and so like I would really like to get this part settled down. So all I'm saying there is that like last week we didn't do it as much, but the few weeks before that I had been working on being in the, so I've done a kind of a combination of things. I've done like being in the room with him and just having him be in the crate for a while.
Yeah.
I've tried doing it where like I'm working in my office and he's in the crate and he's usually okay, and I do that. I don't know, a couple, 3 times a week, something like that.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we started working, Seamus and I started working on outside. We did that a little bit last week as well.
And in like a perfect world, where would you use the crate and how often?
I would do when we leave for sure, and then I think really just when we leave. He is usually really good about staying upstairs whenever it's like bedtime and that sort of thing, and he's fine. He behaves perfectly fine.
And how often do you guys leave the house? Like, do you work from home? Is somebody here all the time, kind of thing?
I do, and I think that's been part of the problem with him is that when we got him, the pandemic was still going on, and I've been working from home since he's been alive. So he doesn't. We don't leave that often. We're not all gone at the same time very often.
Okay, I understand. Yeah. And when you currently leave the house, what do you do with him? Do you crate him, or do you leave him out? Or?
So this week we have not been crating him, and he's been okay.
Okay.
But for the few since we got him back from you all, we had been crating him whenever we left the house.
And the issue is the drool. Is that what Seamus was saying? He's like drooling like a lot.
Drool, pee. Yeah. Just really, when we get home, he's like worked up. You can tell that he's been like, it's like he went through like a 10-round boxing fight. Whenever you get home, he's just like completely zapped. He immediately will come up to you and like he's really zapped, but as soon as he calms down, he falls right asleep because he's been just expending tons of energy. And he's basically probably like 3 notches above this level of anxiety for I'm guessing the amount of time we're gone. He's just like,
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things where there's a couple sides to this conversation, right? So side number one is like I'm a big proponent of, crating dogs, right? I think it's the safest thing for them. I think it's the easiest thing for them. And, there are some dogs that do better or worse in the crate. Like I have 4 dogs, and 3 of them do phenomenal in the crate. It's like not a problem at all. My Malinois, he's a high energy working breed dog, and his entire life has never loved the crate, right?
Really?
He was like horrible with it when he was younger. Same deal. He'd have accidents in it. He would just be worked up and spinning the thing the whole time and stuff, right? Yeah. And it was kind of like a long and persistent road of just, you get in the crate, dude, right? Yeah. And I would make sure, like, if I knew I was going to be leaving for a long period of time, I would let him out a couple extra times, right? Make sure he cleared everything out of his system so that at least I checked that box, right? I would make sure that, when I was, when he was in the crate, any nonsense in it, I corrected for it, and my expectation wasn't that he was like loving the crate or that he was like 100% chill and calm and sleeping in the crate. I just needed to make sure he wasn't hurting himself in the crate and that he wasn't like disgustingly covered in like his own urine like every time I came home, right? And when I made those my criteria and I didn't worry so much about the stress, aside from the specific things he did when he was stressed, so like, you know, the spinning or excessive barking in it or things like that, and stop those things, what happened is the stress started going down over time, right? And he got better with it, right? And, you know, I would say he doesn't love the crate still to this day, right? He's like 9 years old, he's been being crated his whole life, right? Still doesn't love it, but he goes in when I ask him to. He doesn't break out of the crate, he doesn't have accidents in the crate, you know what I mean? Like he's relatively calm, you know, in the crate, and that's okay, right? So that's one side of the conversation, is almost a little bit of like expectation setting with it, of like, this dog is probably never going to be totally calm in the crate, right? But we probably can get him to a place where he's more manageable in it, right?
That would be great.
The other side of the conversation is when we work with dogs that have really bad crate anxiety, is we want to make sure we can crate them if need be, but this is like the dog trainer / non-dog trainer talking right now. I am not totally opposed to, if like we get some dogs that are just so bad in the crate and we could fight with them and get them better with it, but when you leave them out of the crate, they're just like, okay. Right? And that's where, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of that side of things, but it's not like if, hypothetically speaking, you guys or your wife, right, was just like, he's too stressed in the crate, I don't want to do it, right? And he's okay with being out, and you're not coming back to your house destroyed and stuff like that, right? It's not like it's a total failure if you say like, all right, we're just going to do that.
We're just going to give up on the crate.
You know what I mean?
And go to the,
So that's kind of the two sides of the conversation I always give everybody with this kind of stuff.
And I would say with him, we're like 50-50 on the, might be okay with being out of the crate. Like 50% of the time, maybe even more than that. Probably like 80% of the time, he's totally fine being on his own. But then we've also had him like chew up couch cushions. And we've had him being in this room in particular. And so I'm not sure. If like over time, maybe he'll get better. Like when he's not a puppy anymore.
Well, a lot of times, if we're going to go that route with things, which again, we're going to work the crate today. I don't want to totally throw this away, obviously. But a lot of times, if we're going to kind of go that route with things, usually my first recommendation is you can't go from like either crate to total 100% access at the house, right? So I would look for a way to confine him in an area that we could have at least a little bit kind of puppy-proofed, you know what I mean? That'll be similar to the crate, where like we don't have to worry about the whole house getting chewed up, obviously, when we're not here. But it's big enough where he doesn't get the same kind of confinement anxiety as he does with like the current crate, right? So that's kind of how I would look at that stuff. And then you could, you know, a lot of times when you're leaving the dog loose in a room and they're not in like a heightened state of anxiety, you could simulate and stop the like just nuisance behaviors like chewing things up much easier, right? So similar to what you're doing with the crate, like let's say we were going to go that route with things, what I would do is let's just say hypothetically you're going to close them in this room, right? Whatever.
When we've done it in the past, it's been those two rooms because we've got
These
this like
two
self-closing door and that
Oh,
sort of
perfect.
stuff.
Is I would actually set up some drills where like you either set up like a computer or a phone or a camera on FaceTime, right?
Oh, that's a good idea.
So that you could go and leave for a little bit and hang out front for an hour or something like that and try to catch him chewing on the couch, right? Because that is going to be much easier. You catch that and correct that really high, that'll stop. You know what I mean? That's not like an anxiety, like, I'm so worked up I need to chew on this couch. It's just, I'm bored, let me try to chew on this couch. You know what I mean?
You know there's a consequence to that, it's going to go.
Exactly, right? No different than jumping, right? Like he's not really jumping that much now, right? Well, probably because you corrected it a couple times.
Yeah, he doesn't, I've never had him jump.
So I say all that to say there's options, you know what I mean? Like if for whatever reason the crate is like just too hard or you guys want to kind of try to tackle it that other way, it's an option and there's ways to do it successfully. You know what I mean? Without just like fingers crossed, like I hope this works kind of thing. Okay, so my next question was, and I don't remember if we touched on this. When you do leave him in the crate, I know you said when you leave, you come back, he's all distressed and stuff. But are you getting a lot of like? I know he's whimpering and whining a lot. Is he doing a lot of like barking and stuff in the kennel? And he's doing that when you guys go to leave, also.
Yes.
You're finding?
Well, he doesn't do it whenever we're here, but as soon as we leave, yes. If we like hide outside or whatever, just to see
Yeah.
what he does. Like, there's barking, there's whining like
Yep.
that, and that whining will like accelerate to,
Yeah.
11 or whatever.
Yep, I gotcha.
And then barking and all that. So yeah,
Okay.
all kinds of vocalizations.
So here's the thing, right? So we could practice drills like this and like simulate leaving and stuff like that all day, but for some dogs, like when they know we're actually leaving, they know it's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when we're gone, there's only so much that you can do about correcting for that kind of stuff. So what I try to do is I set up drills similar to what you and Seamus have worked on so far, similar to what we're doing right now, to pattern in the proper behavior, right? And then what I do is I try to figure out ways for when I'm actually not there, how can I make sure that this is still being enforced where he doesn't cycle totally out of control, right? Because you could probably keep it manageable where like he doesn't get too intense like when you're here, but once you leave, if he starts realizing I'm chirping, then I start barking and there's no corrections, then maybe I start pawing at the crate or all those types of things, it's going to keep spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, right?
Yeah.
So other things we've done with dogs like him that can be very, very effective sometimes is implementing only when we leave the house a bark collar as opposed to the e-collar, which would basically automatically give corrections when the behavior started escalating to the point where it wasn't just a little bit of whimpering, it was either the really loud whimpering or it was the barking. And if we've done a good job of patterning in giving the corrections when we're here, he'll associate that with calming down in it, right? So thing number 2 is going to be, will he shred things that you put in there?
No.
Okay, so there is, there's kind of like an old school way of working through kennel anxiety that a long time ago, a couple trainers out in like the Indiana area came up with, and they called it like the straw method, right? And the idea was no different than like farm animals and stuff. Dogs would like to nest themselves into things, right? So basically what they did, and this is not how I'm gonna have you do it obviously, but they would take a crate and they would pack it like 1.5 feet deep with straw, right? And what would happen is they would find these kennel anxiety dogs, they would put them in the kennel with that, and it would be like 3 minutes of them getting themselves worked up, and they'd be like, and they would literally nest themselves into it and be like totally chill.
Really?
Right?
Okay.
So we've simulated that before just with like a ton of like big cushy comforters and blankets and stuff like that, but like a lot of them to the point where it's like really, really nesty.
Okay.
You know what I mean? The only thing with that I always say is you just gotta make sure they're not gonna shred it, because like you don't want to put anything in the kennel they're gonna be able to ingest possibly.
Yeah.
You know? So that would be your only thing with that. But if he's not gonna shred those things, that would be another thing I would do, is make that thing as like freaking cushy and dense as you can, so he can really get himself like settled into it.
Okay.
See if you notice a difference with that also.
Yep.
Right? So those are 2 things past just working the drills that can make it so when you actually leave the house, your probability that he's getting himself ramped up is significantly lower.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
And like I said, right now I'm kind of throwing like a lot at you as far as different options and different things that you can kind of work with and try, so you can play around with this and figure out what's going to work best for you, right? Because like right now, this is interesting. So if he were on a bed stay, would he be doing the same thing right now, do you think?
He definitely whines a little bit, but not to that level.
It's not to this level? Okay, gotcha. So sometimes another thing that we'll do is we'll start working crate stays, like almost in place of the bed stays, to get him out of this state of mind of like the crate is something different. You know what I mean? So we're patterning it in that it's no different than your bag, right? It's just a command, right? And if he's this bad with us in here with the door open, like we're literally just gonna have him stay there right now. Like we need to let him kind of just work through this and get past some of this kind of stuff. Yeah. And again, getting back to my dog that had kennel anxiety issues, one thing that I found with him was that past his kennel anxiety issues, his separation anxiety issues were really, really high as well, where if I would put him in a bed stay and I would be doing something, having a conversation with somebody, God, like the first couple times that I did it, he would sit there and like, it was worse than this, he would sit there like screaming on the bed, just like, get up, right? So it was just one of those things where there was no magic solution aside from I just had to let him work through it. And in some cases it would be like an hour. It would be like an hour and a half, you know what I mean? Of working through it. And at some point he's gonna fall asleep. You know what I mean? At some point you're gonna wear yourself out and you're gonna fall asleep, and then you're gonna realize, oh, okay, I don't need to get myself so ramped up. I'm still here, I still have to stay here, but now I'm relaxing. You're starting to pattern that state of mind in, right? Okay. So stuff like this will be obviously productive to work on as well. I try to look at like the root of this issue is he is distressed of us being away from him while he's in. Like he wants to get out so bad, right? And he's just got to realize you're just not getting out. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. And practicing it more with the door open helps a lot when you go to close it, because if his thought process is the only thing holding me in this crate is that door being closed, it's always going to be hard. right? He's gonna look at it as like, "Whoa, this is your prison. We're locking you in here." You know what I mean? Where right now he's holding himself in there. It's a much higher degree of impulse control, right? Where he can't allow himself to ramp up past this point, because if he ramps up past this point, he's not going to pay attention to the rule anymore, and he's going to make a mistake and get a correction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, now he's got the attention.
So let's go ahead and let's walk further into here. I want to go out of sight.
Okay.
Paige, I'm actually going to have you come over here as well, because I want to have him not be able to see us. And we'll just see, obviously, if he holds this well or if he gets up in a minute.
I'm glad that he's doing it while you guys are here. So
Yeah, right.
You can see what's going on.
Yeah, sometimes you get that where they're on their best behavior when we come over.
Like I know Seamus means business. I'm gonna be on my P's and Q's.
You know, it's funny, I always tell everybody, like, like, of all the behavioral, people are always like, oh, I bet you, like, the aggressive dogs and this and that are always the hard ones. And I always say, like, the dogs with, like, really horrible, like, separation anxiety or confinement anxiety, those are always the most difficult cases.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing you could do, you know, just getting into, like, kind of more short-term game plans here, is you could consider, okay, well, we work the crate like when we're here as training exercises like what we're doing right now, but when we leave the house, we leave him loose in this room. That way we're kind of not totally like throwing the crate away, right? But what we're doing is we're giving him an opportunity to not like fail, right? By like us leaving him in the crate and him getting himself all ramped up, right? And having it be like 50% of the time the crate is terrible and he's doing really poorly with it, and 50% of the time like we're doing structure like this and like, you know, keeping him a little more successful with it.
So you think, like, do these sorts of things where we're around the house, in the room with him, whatever, you know, those sorts of mix of things where we're not leaving.
Yeah.
But then when we leave, actually leave him out, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, that is what I said. The reason why I say that, though, is if he's going to be that bad when you're not here, by patterning it in that way, right, what you're doing is you're only allowing yourself to have successful crate repetitions. Even though he's worked up in there, right, we're being successful. You know what I mean? Like, he's holding it, right? It's hard for him to hold it, but he's holding it and he's not really getting away with anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when you're not here, unless we implement something like, say, like the bark collar or something like that, you know, ultimately when you leave the house, he's getting away with doing all sorts of shit he's not supposed to. Because we'll see, like, every breed under the face of the sun, like, we'll get, like, a scout out of them. You know? Like, similar energy and temperament and stuff.
Yeah.
Just very neurotic.
Yeah. It's everything, too. Like, vacuum cleaners. Anything that would possibly, like, get him overstimulated.
What does he do with vacuum cleaners?
He's scared to death. He runs away from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not that I have an issue with him running away from the vacuum by any means. And you don't have to do bed stays around the vacuum all the time, but anytime I notice areas where I feel like I might not have control over the dog in the area, I always look to at least make sure I work through it, and then I don't have to do it anymore, right?
Sure.
So maybe next time you go to take the vacuum out, put him in a bed stay, vacuum around, and just make sure you could get him to keep himself under control around it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
All those things kind of go, when you look at dogs like him, you're really looking to just leverage everywhere, right? The reason why something like that's important is because, like, okay, it's just a vacuum. It's not a big deal. Let's say he goes and runs into the other room while we're vacuuming, like, whatever, right? But, like, what if you never gain control of that, right? You don't have control over it, and then you're out on a walk or doing off-leash stuff with him one day, and something spooks him similar to the vacuum.
Right.
And because we've never gained control around something that really spooks him before, he takes off or whatever. You know what I mean? So that's why I look at working on those things as something so important, is because you never know when something else is going to pop up, you know, somewhere where it's less of a controlled situation that you need to be able to make sure you have them under control around still.
Right, so it's like not specifically the vacuum cleaner, but just things that might scare him.
Correct.
Being able to get him under control.
Yes. Well, I mean, he's still panting a lot of there, but like we're hardly getting any whining, which is great. So
he's usually, you know, he goes between like being semi-whiny, and this was actually the worst I've seen him in a while in the house. But there's many times where we can get him close to this, like definitely not calm, but not, at least not like vocal.
Yeah, I got you.
That. Yeah.
okay. Now we'll I'll just ignore him right now.
And he's like this, right after the crate, like
Yep.
kind of ignore him, you said?
Oh, totally ignore him, yeah. Because just like we talked about, not giving him a reason to get so amped up, I don't want to get him out of the crate and be like, oh my god, we're back, it's okay, this, that. Which just reassures him that that sucks and this is great.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We want a neutral, nothing's changing. We're still not getting you all worked up or anything like that.
Oh, like really, like was kind of gearing towards maybe
Just blowing that red light.
Yeah, well,
Did you get that on camera? Mm-hmm. Him blowing that red light?
2 of them.
I had it. I was in the middle of the intersection.
It was
But-
yellow.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, this is David with Miracle Canine.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. So I got your message, obviously. It looks like you were looking to kind of chat about your situation a little bit.
Right. I mean, I think I know that we're probably going to go with BE. I just guess I wanted to touch bases with someone who knew. Like, my vet's pretty much unwilling to talk to me at this point.
Unwilling to talk to you?
Yeah, like, I
Just
called
because of you possibly doing that?
Yeah, he's an angel. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like, the whole thing to me, in mean words, is like, it's a whole mind fuck because...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm with her. She listens. She's perfect. She's fine.
Yeah.
I walk the door and she's a whole different dog.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely tough when, like, you see, obviously, under 90% of circumstances, like, all the good, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So what's kind of going on that's, you know, making you think, obviously, this is the right choice?
It was fine when she was a puppy, but as she got bigger and older, she just never acted like a mastiff. She's always been super hyper afraid, like always ducking people and like any kind of noise, any kind of quick movement. You know, she's skitterish and super fence reactive because I had a chain link fence, so I paid to have a freaking privacy fence installed during COVID, which was incredibly expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Sure.
lumber.
Yep.
So, but it just was, you know, okay, so she's not getting along with the neighbor dogs, and the neighbors are kind of jerks, so let's just put up a fence and we won't deal with it. Well, everything would have been fine, but I wound up losing my house, and I had to move to a rental.
Mm-hmm.
And since we have moved, there's been other incidents, like she has to be crated when anybody's over, like there's maybe 1 or 2 people that she's tolerant of, otherwise she's crated when people are over because she doesn't like people.
What does she do?
She doesn't like other people, she doesn't like other dogs.
Yeah, but what does she, like, so let's say you didn't crate her when people were over, like, what would she do?
Bark, growl, and charge them.
Okay.
Like, not jumping, not fun jumping. Like,
Yeah, I
she
understand. Yeah.
is like, hell no, you can't be in my house.
Yep.
So I've always done that. The other thing I noticed lately, probably over the last year, and I have another dog, a tiny little 13-pound mutt. She's fine, whatever. Anytime I would take her to the groomer, I'd come home and Minnie would want to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, insane, going after her. Like, we'd have to, like, crate her up, bring the other dog in through another door, keep them separate, and then after she didn't stink, she'd be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once we moved, she started doing that all the time.
Yep.
All the time. So then I'm like, okay, like, we got to do something because this whole rental thing, this isn't going to work because she hates everybody. So
Sure.
they're a bigger academy here in the state, you know, whatever. It's supposed to be really good. I spent a ton of money on a board and train, which I'm fine with
Sure.
because if it worked or whatever. You know, I realized it was, you know, and they told me a million times, you know, genetics play into this, and, you know, and they let me know during the board and train that they had some issues. They had to start out muzzling her, and they had to use pinch collars, and I do at home, I have the Boss e-collar for her.
Yep.
And so when she first came home, she was all right. Well, actually not. The first night we came home, I completely didn't even think about the little dog. I'm like, oh, she was great around all these other dogs when we were at camp. We walked in the door, and the little dog barked and ran, and it was on.
Yeah.
Like, she tried to kill her. So took everything we had to get them separated. So the little dog's been living upstairs now since.
So they've been just
that.
separated?
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely separated because I didn't want to mess around with it.
Yeah, sure.
So then she was good outside. Like, I could walk her outside. She's a great heel, leash around the neck, no big deal. And then one day we were out in the backyard, and our neighbor has a very aggressive German Shepherd that charged her. Mm-hmm. And she was like, okay, let's play. So, I got a major leash burn on my hand, and she just took off and went after that dog. We did get them separated. Nobody drew blood. Mm-hmm. She gets a little weird with me, tries to hump me and stuff sometimes. But after that, then she started going after neighbor's dog. Yep. Like, I have a broken finger and a broken rib now because a couple days before she bit my neighbor, she saw the neighbor's dog 3 houses away and took off. Pulled me so hard, literally, I hit the ground and cracked my rib. I got bruises, broken fingers. I've been off work for over a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then 2 days after that, she was fine. I had her across the street to use the restroom. We were coming in on a heel, which, the trainer was like, as long as she's paying attention to her heel and she's in check, she shouldn't worry about anybody else. And we'd come past the neighbor before, and my usual thing is to not hold eye contact with him or, stop or anything, but say, hi, Parker, how you doing today? Just coming through. And I did, and he said hi, and she went insane and charged him and jumped on him, tried to bite his face. She got his arm. We're on a quarantine, and she's listed with the city as a dangerous dog, and I feel like she's afraid all the time.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of her now.
Sure.
Because I couldn't control her and I can't hold her. I really don't want to medicate her. And I just feel like she also did go through another boot camp that wasn't a board and train. So I'm like...
What do you mean?
She went during COVID when I first got her. Like, I did a basic obedience boot camp thing, but it was COVID, so I had to drop her off and pick her up.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like where I'm at, I've put every ounce of energy into training her and making it so I can take care of her.
Yeah.
And I can as long as I'm inside my doors.
Yeah.
But that's no life for either one of us.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just feel like rehoming her, like you said in your video, nobody's going to like her the way I do. And if she acts like that, she's going to wind up somewhere alone by herself. And I don't want that.
Yeah, sure. Out of curiosity, so with the training company that you did the board and how long, did you say it was like an 8-week board and train or something?
8 weeks. Yeah, okay. 8 weeks.
Now, with that board and train, how much training did you get after the trainer or after the training?
They're pretty good. I guess to me it was pretty good. We had a 5-hour, it was like a day-long hands-on thing. I mean, and they've been really good, about talking to me and stuff.
Yeah, but did you just have that, like as far as like in-person training, did you only get that 5-hour send-home lesson?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, listen, I mean, it's a tough situation you're in. And the problem is when we're kind of in these scenarios where it's like, we could sit here and be like, well, some of, a lot of these issues you're describing to me, like, probably stem from you just not knowing how to handle her in a lot of these situations. You know what I mean? And I would say that's a lot of the time, right? Like when we're dealing with any sort of behavioral modification, is the owner education side of things is really the most important. And yeah, I mean, a 5-hour long send home is nice, but I mean, I always tell everybody in our send home lessons that we do with them, like you're going to retain 60 to 70% of what we throw at you, and our lesson is only 3 hours long. It's a lot that we're cramming on you all at once, and the dogs, obviously it's a lot on the dog, it's a lot on the owner. You're just excited to see your dog again, so you're trying to take the information while seeing your dog, you know what I mean? And it usually takes quite a bit more to really get you the education that you need, which is where, I know nothing about this training company, obviously, but I know with behavioral modification, in my opinion, one lesson is nowhere near enough to get you the education you're going to need in order for that training to be successful, right? So I say that because it's like, all right, well, we could play two sides of the spectrum of this. We could play side number one, which is you haven't been trained, really, right? Like, you've been trained a little bit, and I'm sure they've answered some questions and stuff you've had, but, like, you haven't really had, like, extensive training to know exactly how to handle every single one of these situations. And where a lot of your problems have happened in places where, you know, you just haven't had control over the dog. The dog has decided to do something, and then you've just been at the mercy of, well, this is going to happen, and we just got to, you know, break it up or stop it or whatever it may be, and use too much management.
Well,
stuff
I mean,
like
I try to stop it.
Of course. Yeah.
Ability. She weighs 120 pounds.
No. I totally understand what you're saying, right? So that's side number one, which is like, well, you know, from a training standpoint, it doesn't sound like this company really set you up for success a whole lot as far as, you know, making sure they really kind of helped kind of hold your hand through a lot of this stuff and get you all the education you need. But the other side of the spectrum is, like, you've been through a lot of shit with this dog now, right? And regardless of, let's say we could, you know, in a perfect world, if we were working with you and spent more time with you and stuff, we might be able to get you to a place where you can manage this stuff, like, far more effectively than you are right now. Like, at this point, you've been through so much shit, right? You've been through legal issues. You've been through your dogs getting injured. You've been through you getting injured. You've been through other people getting injured, where it's like, you know, regardless of what happened or what you've done, it's like the dog's had quite a few strikes already. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, I always tell everybody there's never a right answer to this of, like, well, yeah, given these circumstances you should do it, or given these circumstances you shouldn't do it, because everybody's situation is different. You know, there's so many variables. There's the dog, there's you, there's where you're at in your life. Like, forget the dog. Like, if you're dealing with house situations, you're in an apartment, you got to put a fence, you know what I mean? Like that's a whole side of the equation that, you know, obviously only you know and only you can make the decision on. Of how much mental capacity do you have to even spend on trying to work through things more, you know? We've seen people that have chosen to, you know, euthanize dogs that I think have way less issues than you're describing right now, that in my opinion are borderline not a big deal. And then we've seen people keep dogs that are truly man-eaters that I think probably should have been put down immediately, you know? So it's really, it's your decision to make. Biggest thing I always tell everybody is, I think a lot of the thing that holds us back from making the decision is the possibility of like we judge ourselves too much for it, and we feel like, you know, other people are going to judge us for that. And especially, like, given your vet's already given you a really hard time about this, like, find a new vet immediately. There's no reason why your vet should be judging you for this unless they're actively in your shoes, which they're not, right? That's not their job to make.
I mean, just back in June, they had to, like, it took forever to get her sedated so they could put her a rabies vaccine.
Sure.
They know what she's like.
Yeah, exactly. So
they
they're not.
See her without a muzzle. They won't see her without sedation. But then they don't want to talk to me about how to deal with it.
I'm with you on that. You know, that's not their decision to make, right? It's your decision to make. So, you know, whatever route you decide to go with this, you just got to be kind of gentle on yourself over it, right? It's okay to say, hey, you know, like, I've tried. Whether I've tried absolutely everything under the sun or not is, you know, we could play that game forever, obviously, but you've done a lot, right? And you've experienced a lot of shit with this dog. And if you feel like at this point it's like, you know, the risk and the all of that is just too high, I think that's an okay decision for you to make.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, because this neighbor has like a 5-year-old daughter, and I'm just afraid of.
I totally get it.
If that had been the kid, oh God, I can't even imagine.
I'm 100% with you on that. You know, you gotta weigh all the risks obviously out, and, you know, anytime there's children involved or things like that, or your little dog, obviously, you know, keeping them totally separate. I mean, that's a whole other thing. See, okay, let me do this for the vlog here. Okay, so that's a person that just reached out to me randomly. They found our podcast. She wanted to discuss her situation. She's in would you say Minneapolis, something like that, Minnesota, somewhere around there, right? 8-week board and train, 1 5-hour-long send home lesson, and that's it. I just can't wrap my head around it. How do you think somebody with a serious problematic behavioral issues is going to learn how to be the absolute handler that they need to be in order to help their dog get past that in one single session. And not only that, a 5-hour session, cramming every freaking possible. I don't understand. And I'm sure she spent so much freaking money on an 8-week board and train for that. That is a situation, I really don't like to like rap on trainers too much and stuff, but that trainer failed that client. And there's a very real possibility that if she worked with a good trainer, I'm not saying us, right? I'm just saying somebody that actually is going to invest the time into the owner, because the owner is what needs trained, not the dog. There's a very real possibility that this would have went a very, very different way. But unfortunately now she's been failed by this training company. She's too far gone at this point. There's not really an alternative. So that shit sucks. That does piss me off when I hear stuff like that. If you're a training company, offer more follow-up support. If you think you're offering enough follow-up support right now, you're not, offer more. And that's it.
When I take him on the walks, he's good, like he'll heel, but when he sees a dog, he's explosive. So he's explosive with dogs, 9 out of 10 times. At the house, he'll still jump off his placemat and bark at the window, but I can get him back quick.
I got you.
Hit and then bring him back. And when we have company, I don't trust him to have company, so he's always creative when we have company.
Okay.
My oldest daughter has a boyfriend that comes over regularly. A few times we brought him on leash. They've been kind of cool, but my anxiety might be feeding.
No, I got you. Yeah.
So, I saw your videos on Instagram. I didn't even know you were in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Until I saw Michael's own.
Yeah.
And I saw you doing the group training sessions, and I think you go to people's neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes.
I have some neighbors that I could say, can you bring your dogs out that he always hates, and maybe we could do that. But it's basically he follows this simple. We learn the 3 commands: heel, come, and sit and down.
Yeah.
So he knows those 4 things with some hand signals. But when he gets into that, like crazy aggression,
Can't reel him back in.
And
Well, that was going to be my next question is, what do you feel like if you had to really look at, like that session, for example, and seeing how handled it versus like when you go take them out for your walks, what do you feel like is different?
I really don't know. I need someone
It feels similar.
I need someone to watch what I'm doing and tell me, like, okay, this is what you're doing wrong. Like,
What we'll do is, right off the rip, I usually like to see how people handle the dog coming in and stuff. And like, you got him in the down, your correction timing was perfect with the down, so that all looks good. So far your timing looks accurate with stuff, right? Now you said you don't trust him when people come over. What, has he had a history of like actual aggression towards people before, or? Okay.
He knocked my stepdad down, came to the door, opened the storm door, my wife opened the storm door, and he lunged past her, knocked him down, and hit him in the leg. That was before.
Gotcha.
That's what prompted us to take him.
Yeah, sure. And you said in the house he's more manageable now, but do you just kind of, I know you said you crate him when people come over.
Yeah, because if he's on his it's like a elevated place.
Yeah, sure.
If he's on his bed and someone rings the door, starts to come in, he kind of gets into this looking mode, and I'm like, no, but he's still like really caring about what's going on. So because of things that happen, I don't trust to leave him loose. So
No, I understand.
I'll either have the leash on him, and then he might still not be paying attention to me, like lunge off, and I have to pull him back.
Okay. Well, let's do this. What we'll do is we'll start off by, I want to take him outside. I want to see how you're walking him. Yeah, let's go ahead and start walking here. We'll head down towards the street and start walking down. And I want you to just do whatever you normally would do. And I'll see what it looks like. There generally can be a little bit more territorial around the house. And especially if he's still a little bit in the mindset of the house of like being protective and guarding and being restrained from people and stuff, like that's gonna cause him to ramp up a little bit, So the one thing I would say is like, I'm all for good management and making sure that we're not putting him in a position to fail, from the standpoint of when people are coming over. But I don't want to do it because I feel like I don't have control over him when guests come over. You get what I'm saying? So let's say like you're putting him in the crate right now when guests come over. Are you said obviously because you don't trust him to be free. Do you trust that if you didn't have him in the crate, you could keep him under direct control the entire time people were over?
If I have him on the leash,
Yeah.
then I feel safer about it. I think he might go nuts at first.
Okay.
But then he goes down and stay down.
Okay.
Next to him.
Yeah. So we probably want to actually get that even a little bit better, you know, from the standpoint of when people are coming in, the initial, right, we're not having that big explosion, and we're able to keep them a little bit more under control. That's going to be a big part of this as well. So that's kind of what I mean about that, is if I notice situations where, you know, I want to manage them or put them away, like for example, like if we have a ton of people come over the house for like we had a graduation party for my wife a couple weeks ago, and we just put the dogs away. It just like wasn't worth having them out. We had like 30 people at the house, just too much, right? But I didn't put them away because I couldn't control them in that situation. It was just because there's no need for me to do it, right? So yeah, if that's a problem of people coming in initially, we're going to want to work on that a little bit too. Yeah, so what we'll do, and I'm intentionally not going to handle him a lot today because I want to I don't want him to see me as the trainer. You know what I mean? Yeah. I want to just we'll go this way, be like a neutral party here that could just observe how he's reacting with you and coach you through working through this stuff. So we'll see what we see today. If we don't see anything, if like he's fine with the dog, stuff like that, yeah, we'll just swing out to the house and we'll see if you can set up with a couple of your neighbors.
Okay. You guys do training with treats sometimes?
Yeah. You're not going to hurt anything by adding some rewards in, you know?
It might be a component that might be helpful for him.
Maybe, you know, like sometimes the rewards can come into play once you've gotten the dog past the hurdle to expedite them like emotionally overcoming it. You know what I mean? So like if he's really stressed out with new people coming over, for example, and we correct it, we stop it, we get him listening to us, but then maybe he's a little bit stressed still, the treats can help expedite him developing a little bit more positive of association with the people coming over then at that point. We just want to make sure, the biggest thing with treats, and this is what I think most people would agree, is you just don't want to use them as like a bribe, right? Yeah, so I want you to do whatever you normally would do, but you see how he's crawling and getting up off his elbows and stuff? I want you to be a lot more strict on that also. Yeah, he needs to stay in that down. So if you notice him squirming over, you could tell him no and give a correction for that.
Yeah, we've never been down outside this long.
Sure.
So just stay here while they come?
Yeah, let's just hang out here and see what we get.
Go.
All right. So why don't you create a little distance here real quick? You can just walk over that way a little bit. Yeah. And then pop him into a down again.
Down. No. Down.
Yeah.
No. Down.
Yep, I see what you're saying. So let me see the remote.
Sure.
And then go ahead and tell him no.
No.
And then tell him down.
Down.
Then give him a second. Tell him no again.
No. Louis, down.
Give him a second. Tell him no again.
No. Louis, down.
And I see what you mean about the little bit of attitude there too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so a couple things right off the rip. Yep. Seamus, why don't you go ahead and just kind of walk past a few times here? And now getting back to the rewards, like at this point, how he checked in with you there, that's where I would hypothetically add a reward into things. But I'm not even super worried about that right off the rip just yet here. So a couple things. So that first correction you gave, he hadn't made a mistake yet. He was in the down. And I understand what you were probably doing, which was trying to catch like the fixation, right, and interrupt that. But in a lot of cases, you'll see exactly what you saw there, which is you corrected the fixation and it actually triggered him, right? So again, yes, 10 trainers, everyone will probably have a little bit different of an opinion. I'm not the biggest fan of like trying to catch the loading stage of things, because the way I look at it is the loading stage is the dog is making the decision if they're gonna react or not. But they haven't done it yet, right? I wanna catch things as early as possible, but I wanna catch the earliest sign of a mistake, right? Which would be him, elbows coming up, starting to move forward, things like that, right? Second thing is, at that point, once you were correcting him, the level was way too low, you could tell, right? So those last couple of corrections were all the way up on this, right? So as soon as you handed it to me, I went all the way up because I could see he wasn't giving a shit about that 60 right there, right? And even the 100, it's not like he was really, really caring about, but he cared enough about it in order to get him to be compliant. And then the last piece of the puzzle is you could tell he's definitely used to pushing back on you when you try to correct, which is why it took so many corrections to get him into that position. So we just need to follow through until we get him there, right? I have to be able to win that fight. Like right there, he tested you, and then he's like, all right, fine, I'll give up, right? And that was one win, right? So that's right off the rip, a couple things that I'm seeing is prior to seeing the dog, obviously, the inching around in the down, we gotta get more strict on that. 2, not correcting the loading, waiting until he actually makes a mistake, obviously. And then 3, I mean, this thing is going to need to be set much higher for that stuff at least.
Okay. Louis, down. Nope. Nope.
Yep.
Louis, down. Down.
There you go. Well, we're seeing it, right?
Yeah, I'm glad.
He said, what the hell, Dad? All right, you're getting some focus there.
No phrase at this point, right?
No, yeah.
I'm so glad you guys saw it.
Yeah. And it's really important that you're the one working through this right now. You know what I mean? Like, I could take the leash and I mean, I'm sure he'd still do the same shit and I would work through it and all that kind of stuff. But I don't want him developing the association of I won the battle with him. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to at this point, because that's the problem you ran into last time, right? And we could, by continuously losing fights with a dog, you could train them to push back on the e-collar. You know what I mean? It's like if every time he he reacts and we correct him, and then, you know, he keeps reacting, and then we say, oh well, I can't do anything about it at this point. That teaches him if you fight when you feel this, you can get away with that.
So, do I need to continue pushing through that walk or stop and get him under control, put it down?
Here's the hard thing about real life situations is you only have like 5 seconds to work on it. You know what I mean? Because that person's walking, and especially if they see him reacting, they're going. You know what I mean? So in a lot of cases, even though we might be able to get him under control, that dog is like long gone at that point, right? And in his mind, there might still be a little bit of a percentage that he's like, oh, well, I made that dog go away still. So sometimes it really helps to be able to role play situations like this where, like, okay, he reacted, we got it under control. This dog didn't go away. It's still there.
He knows the dog's there right now.
Oh, yeah. He's no dummy.
No. Louis, down. No. Louis, down. No. Louis, down. Louis, down.
Putting you through the ringer there. So we'll give him a second here. I want to see what happens if he does this again. We might have to make a couple little adjustments. Because, yeah, I mean, you could tell, like, maxed out even, like, he's not caring a whole lot about it right there, so.
Are you just holding it or tapping it?
Yeah, I'm just tap, 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 and you could tell he's hardly caring at all about it. So go ahead and give the heel command. You can start cruising back, and we're going to go back where we came from.
Heel?
And I'll keep handling the remote, just... Well, so that's why I was kind of asking. I didn't know if you ever recommended anything like the bonker before. Because I'll tell you, man, there's been a couple of dogs we've worked with that has been like the magic tool for them. There's others that it doesn't work at all for, you know? But there is something about, like, some dogs are just like very pain insensitive, you know, like when they get aroused, like, you know, how this thing's maxed out and, you know, obviously he could care less about it in that moment. But things that startle them, because like the bonker, if you look at it, it's not hurting it. It's literally a towel. You know what I mean? Right. Like this dog probably runs into trees and is fine. But like projectiles moving very quickly at them is like startling as shit to some dogs. We'll see. We'll run a couple more drills with him here next, and we'll see if we see anything else. We might try just because I'm curious how he responds to it. Yeah, we had this Rottweiler, Hank, that we worked with that was like him, just absolutely explosive. And he did a board and train with us, and we got it. Same deal, probably like 70% better, like with him. But that last little bit was still there. We switched to the bonker with him, and he was owned by, he's big-ass Rottweiler, owned by this like really like tiny, nice lady. And she got that dude real under control with that thing. A couple things. One, I'm not going to use a down or anything for this, because what I'm looking for is I'm looking to see that he doesn't engage with the dog at all, regardless of if he's in position or not. So as the dog comes in, if he perks up and starts moving towards the dog, I'm going to tell him no, and that's when I'm going to take this and just throw it at him, right? And we'll see what we get. So like I said, it may work, it may not work.
Are you going to say something after the no?
No, just no. Yeah. because I don't care what he does as long as he doesn't react at the other dog, right? So you kind of have two sides of working with this stuff. Yeah, go ahead. You know, side number one is obviously managing through obedience commands. So we want to make sure we have compliance around the trigger, right? That's where your down stays, your bed stays, your heel command, all that comes into play. But regardless of if he's in command or not, we want to make sure that he's not going to rehearse that behavior. I don't want to see like overstimulation towards other dogs. You can keep him there. Keep him there. It's fine. Now, the other unspoken side of the dog reactivity conversation is always like, a lot of times when dogs have these big explosive responses, it's because they're uncomfortable, right? They don't know what to make of that thing. They're all worked up. They're insecure. And a lot of times they realize that like barking or growling at it makes it go away, right? So building positive associations in conjunction with keeping them under control around the other dogs is very, very important, right? And that's where I always say like socialization for me has always been a big part of working through this kind of stuff. Because like right there, he didn't know what to make of this dog when he came up. You see how tense and stiff he was and stuff. And they sniffed a little bit, now he's relaxed, right? So he kind of got to explore it on his own and realize, all right, well, this thing it's not messing with me, you know?
Does the gate have anything to do with this feeling safe?
Maybe a little bit. You know, if anything, barriers actually sometimes can make reactivity worse, right? If you look at leash reactivity, he's held back on a leash, right? So you'll notice I was staying 100% loose on this leash. I'm letting him move around and make decisions. And then if that gate does provide some sort of frustration, cause him to start pawing at it or something, I would correct for that. No? What did I say? Right there. He definitely didn't like it. He seemed fazed by that. Now I'm allowing him to create distance with it. He's not in command right now, obviously. I'm allowing him to create distance from it because I want him, if I'm going to give a big correction for something, to realize that you can move away from the trigger as well. That's a big part of this stuff. Perfect. That's good. Okay, so Seamus, I'm going to move over here, and then I'm going to have you walk in, and you'll just kind of do the same thing you were doing out at the park with us. It's funny. This is who we used with Hank also.
Oh, really?
Remember?
Yeah.
Right, so notice the difference in attention right now though, right? Obviously he's looking at the other dog, and this dog's pretty worked up, so he may try to do something. But over there, he started getting overstimulated, and I didn't do anything with him, obviously. He moved away, right? He's like, this is too much, I'm gonna go do something else. So that's where you get back to you know, the insecurity or fear in the behavior is in a lot of cases they learn that with their fear, instead of moving away as an option, they have to react, right? So that was the first time I saw him give space, which was great. It's about as good of a dog as you could bring over for this. It's good. definitely pretty intense with the reactivity. You know, obviously there's a couple little handling things on your part. You know, obviously the early correction that kind of set him off the one time. The level was too low for some of it. A lot of times what I'm looking for when we get dogs like him that come in that have done a decent amount of training so far, they're still struggling with a particular issue, is I try to look at, is there a bunch of little things that you're doing incorrect? And I'm not really seeing a lot of things that you're doing incorrect, right? Your timing with everything seems relatively good aside from a couple minor mistakes. I think it's just, you know, he's realized he could push back on you so much now at this point that once he gets into that state of mind, the e-collar is just useless, right? This seemed very effective with him. I mean, I did it one time and he was like, whoa, what the heck was that? And really kind of squared up nicely after that. The problem with it is a couple of different things. One, before you're gonna use it in like real life situations, you kind of have to master it with something little first. Like you'll notice, like my first correction with it was not him totally going bananas freaking out. It was literally him just pawing at the gate, right? So I basically got as firm as I could on the littlest mistake possible to get him to like snap him out of that state of mind before he escalates. Because once he escalates, it's like you're too far gone. You know what I mean? So what I would be looking for with him is I would be looking to set up a situation exactly like we did like that. Pick one thing you could get very firm on right off the rip, whether it's something like a pawing at a gate, whether it's a little forward movement towards another dog, something like that, and just nail it, nip it in the butt right there and then, you know, and get him into that good state of mind to start here before moving on to putting it into practice on the walk, obviously. But I do want to work him. I want to work him at the house and just kind of see if there's anything else that, you know, we need to see if his behavior is like even worse there or anything like that. So I could swing out to the house sometime next week and just to kind of see. I want to make sure we got all the information we need before I tell you like he really needs this or he really needs that or anything like that. You know. But in the meantime, you can try this if you want to. You just gotta find somewhere good to set it up first. You know, past that, I do think that though the idea of maybe getting him some socialization would probably be good, you know? And we could do that a couple of different ways. We could do that via like, even a day of daycare every now and then. Like our daycare is not like, you know, you just drop them off, he's with dogs for 12 hours or anything like that. We do like individualized time for the dogs while they're here. And we could, you know, kind of get them rolling with some of the social side of things. And then, you know, past this session we're gonna do at the house, you might be able to benefit once we get a good grasp on some of this and figure out what we need to do to get you the rest of the way there. You might benefit from, we offer like a once a month group class. Where it's just a good place for you to come and work around. We usually do small groups, like 4 or 5 dogs. I would say, don't really change a lot about what you're doing aside from when you see the other dogs. You could still use the e-collar, but I would just turn it all the way up preemptively, like put him in a down and see if you could just manage him with that and create as much distance as you can for right now, right? Like that's not gonna be the solution, creating distance, but I just wanna keep you successful and not have too many losses. You know what I mean? So like if you see another dog 50 feet down, go like as far away as you can. Don't like go around a corner or something, but go as far away to make it as easy as possible for him to be successful so we can try to stack some wins, you know? And don't correct for anything aside from if he breaks command, you know?
And if he's going nuts, I'm going to be on high.
Yeah, and you just got to reel him back under control. At that point, it's kind of whatever you need to do to just reel him back in, you know? But if you could literally create as much distance as possible, you know, and just, you know, try to be successful, try to avoid the explosions right now, you know? And then this, I only want you using in a situation where you could set up a scenario, right? Because I don't want to just have it be like, oh, willy-nilly, like somebody's walking by, let me get a quick opportunity, and then like we lose, and then this loses value, you know what I mean? Like I want to be in a situation where you could do it, get him into a good state of mind, and then have a bunch of reps of like, just like we did in there. Dog passed by a bunch of times and it was fine, it was successful, you know? Sure. So it's good though, like I was saying, like he's showing avoidance this time as opposed to reacting. It's actually really good. That's great. Cool, that's good. Okay. No, it's not. This seemed to work very well, and he seemed to really straighten up after that. So let's see if you could set up a scenario where, you know, you capitalize on that. And the big thing I always tell everybody with the bonker is, like, if you're going to do it, do it. You know, like when I did it right there, even for a little thing, like I threw that thing as hard as I could, you know. Just make it count if you're going to do it. That way you don't have to play this game of, like, nagging him.
Okay.
So,
All right, man. Thank
yeah,
you so much.
we'll see you next week. It was great meeting you. So the first thing I'm going to be looking at here as we do this is I want to see that obviously he's not getting up on the sides or anything. I want to make sure he's staying fully in the car seat here. I don't even want him getting up and perching up on this area right here.
Okay.
So we're going to start by making sure that that's the boundary that we set for him. We'll drive out, obviously. We'll see how he does initially as we start driving. And then if you want to pick a drive-through, and we'll go take him through one and see what we get. And then as we get to the drive-through, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put him into a down, and I want him to hold the down, obviously, as we go through. So you can tell even right here, he's too aroused where he's having a hard time getting into this position.
Yeah.
No, down. So this is what we got to start with, is making sure we got the control over this. Hello? Is anybody there? Can I get a small fry for this small fry? Hello? Hello? Good. Well, with a couple mistakes he made the last few times, the good thing is he wasn't super worked up, obviously, and it was very easy to get him back into the down.
Yeah.
So we just got to get a little more practice with this in. You could do like what we talked about, which is like simulated, obviously. You don't have to go through a drive-through every single time.
Yeah.
You know, you could have a friend help you or something and have them like talk to you like out the window. You know, drive, come to a stop, roll your window down, stuff like that. Oh, it was definitely better, yeah. So.
Screaming.
Yeah, man, that first one, we went through that first McDonald's, whew,
Yeah.
that noise he made was horrendous. It was like as soon as you rolled that window down.
Right.
So he's not 100% clear on the expectation, you know. That's why, like, that initial freak out, I gave him a second to see if he settled or not before I actually corrected him.
I think sometimes he does things that he knows is not okay.
Sure.
And he knows I'm going to correct him.
Yeah.
But, so he knows he wants to do it anyways, but so he'll
Yeah.
scream.
Yeah.
He knows I'm going to correct him, and he'll just make the noise.
Well, this is another thing that, you know, if we can get him holding the down a little better like he did over those last couple times, that's where I would start adding a reward in also. You know, you can give him a treat when he does it correct.
Yeah.
So we'll maybe do that next time where, you know, we'll simulate some more of that, but we'll start adding in some positive reinforcement when he does it good. Behind the scenes.
So, and then, I'm not gonna do it right now, but I'll go ahead and scoop them.
Sure.
They generally know how to keep their space. Tuck's usually over there, Scout's on the side.
They typically know to sit down beforehand.
Yeah.
Sure.
And they'll wait before we say, okay.
Mhm.
So. go
And
ahead.
then they just eat and...
And then they're done.
Yeah, and then they play this little game of like, hey, I'm gonna clean up
The other bowl.
mother bowl.
Understood.
Wait,
Yeah,
wait
yeah,
for the
yeah,
other
yeah.
person to kind of make the first move. He
Yep.
usually evacuates first.
Yep, I gotcha. Okay.
And
And did you say, is there any big issues with the feeding?
Not typically.
if-
Okay.
Yeah, no. I've never had any issues with feeding them in their bowls.
Yep.
But if we were to set one bowl down in between them, or if we were to drop kibble in between the two of them,
Yeah.
there's probably a 1 in 10 chance of them.
They're both going for it.
Both go for it. He knows not to mess around with it,
Yeah.
and he'll be watching Tuck the whole time.
Yeah.
And pretty much like kind of back him down. And
Yeah, I gotcha.
If they do go,
Yeah, I got you.
It's almost like I don't know who bites first or who snaps first.
Totally get it. Okay, well, let's do this. Let's start with the feeding. I'm just going to kind of watch you do it, and we'll see if there's any big problems that we want to address with it.
Second. Scoots.
You don't make tucks often anymore.
It's fine. I don't make my dogs sit before they eat. My expectation is just that they wait. Because really, it doesn't matter if they sit. It only matters that they're not going for the food until we tell them that they can.
Well, that was Kyle.
That's okay.
Okay. And he always barks.
Yeah. It's that excitement bark.
I do keep like we did intentionally keep the food thing in
Sure.
between them as a barrier.
That's okay. So we'll just kind of supervise this, see what we get.
And we just always keep Scout on the left, Tuck on the right.
Yep.
Even if we switch the bowls, or I mean,
Yeah.
they just know.
Okay. Now, is this speed in which they're eating right now pretty normal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Tuck usually will finish first.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So Tuck seems like eating like normal and stuff. Scout is a little concerned about him. You could tell. You see how he keeps looking at him?
Yeah.
Like every time he takes a bite, he looks up and checks in with him. Looks up, checks in with him. Right. Now that's not a problem, right? But you could tell he's a little uncomfortable, right? So what I want to see here is when they finish eating, what happens, right? Because a lot of times, if we get a dog like him who's a little apprehensive around the other dog while they're eating, generally they feel like that dog is going to steal something from them, right? So I want to see when they finish if that happens or not, and if it does, I'll show you guys how to address it. Obviously.
It was amazing to watch,
I
actually.
mean, Scout still protected his food even though he doesn't want to eat it.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. So he walked away, which is great.
Yeah.
We're not usually down here watching them either.
Oh, you're not. Oh, you gotta.
Watch them?
Yeah.
Really?
It's just one of those things because if you're not watching them, you don't know what's going on, right? And even the littlest thing of like, let's say he does go and mess with them every now and then, or vice versa, or something like that, and we're not catching it, like that can become a problem, right? So even with my dogs, I feed all four of them very similar to this, 4 bowls just right next to each other, right? But I'm supervising it every time.
Yeah.
Still, because every once in a blue moon, they don't do anything wrong. They're not like guarding their stuff or anything. But every once in a blue moon, what we'll find is that one of them will get a little curious and a little too curious with the other one. I gotta tell them, hey, give them some space.
Does it mean anything that you being in there signals anything to them, or you're just observing?
It could keep. It could, from the standpoint of just keep. They could know if I'm there, I'm gonna handle any problems, right? Where if I'm not there, they know they have to do that, right? So now Tuck went over and like looked at his bowl right there. That's fine, but I actually would not let Tuck go over and like start licking out of his bowl or anything like that, right? I want to keep it very separate. That like this bowl is his, this bowl is yours. So I won't let him go over to his. I won't let him go over to his.
Okay.
Right. Now, do you guys generally leave the bowls down after feeding time?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. It's not the end of the world. Again, you haven't had big issues or anything like that surrounding the actual feeding time, but sometimes the idea of like putting the bowls up when we're done with feeding doesn't let them develop this association that this spot is like only the feeding spot, because sometimes we'll see dogs get a little territorial over just those areas, and then it eliminates any like an hour later Tuck going and like looking for scraps in his bowl or vice versa, So if you have the ability to, just picking them up, just setting them on top or something when you're done, and just having them just come out for mealtime could be a good idea. But all of that seemed pretty good, honestly. I didn't see it, assuming it's like that every single time and it never gets any worse than that, that was fine.
That was pretty, I would say, very typical.
Yeah, there were no issues with that. The only thing I would say is just watch them when they're eating. Okay, so that seemed good. Now, I know you said like handing treats out and stuff sometimes can get a little bit dicey with them.
Yeah, I don't even know how to show you without.
And the problem is, I know you said, like you kind of described, if something falls on the ground, they both kind of go for it, and it turns into an issue.
I don't even know how to replicate that, because I don't even know if he'll go for it anymore.
He won't go for it if he knows Scout's going for it. The only reason why there's an issue is when Tuck gets there first, and he doesn't see Scout.
Yeah.
And then Scout thinks it's his, and then there's a blow up.
No, I understand. Are they bad about if like you're cooking and you accidentally drop something on the ground, like going for it or anything like that? How is he about like, have you seen in the last couple of weeks since he's been back, like prey in the yard or anything? Or?
They'll chase squirrels up on the fence.
Yeah.
But they're both doing it together.
Yeah.
They know they can't get to it, so there's no fighting over.
Yeah.
Another thing too is like when they play, they'll chase each other.
Sure.
And eventually, Scout will get like, I think he'll start kind of like cutting him off, and he gets pretty nippy with them.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably see that with all
That
play.
is probably just play.
Okay.
That I probably wouldn't be super concerned about. But what you described, which is they're both trying to go for the same thing and they both get to it at the same time and it turns into a squabble, is so common you wouldn't even imagine. And we see it a lot with like playing ball. Like some people will be throwing a ball for their dogs and they'll do that for like a year and they might like squabble a little bit and at some point it turns into like a massive fight, right? And it's because the dogs haven't really learned to like back off to the other one if they get it. So you could handle it a couple of different ways, right? You could handle it from the lens of if it were a situation of ball, like I had to teach my dogs because they're all very ball driven, that when I threw one ball, whoever was going to get it first, the other one had to back off when they got it. And I just taught that by once that dog got it, if they kept going for it, I corrected them for it, or vice versa, right? Or it could be in the case of a treat, where as I'm handing that treat, like if I'm literally giving it to him and he were to come over and try to dart over to get it, I would give him a correction for it, or vice versa, right? And we would just make sure there's some structure to it to some degree. Right now, you're just going to hold it here, and I just want to see what happens. I want to see if Scout seems like he's getting uncomfortable with him. Now, you can see both dogs are very engaged, obviously, so we're going to definitely make sure that there's some rules to this. So we're going to start with, because Scout has kind of always been the problem, more or less, with a lot of this, we're going to start by giving it to Tuck, and what I want you to do is, as you're giving it to Tuck, if Scout darts over to your hand, tell him no for that.
I'll go pretty slow.
You don't have to go super slow, you know? No, we're not trying to like trick him. You could just kind of give it like normal. Very good. Let's try one more time here. So that seemed pretty good. He was waiting pretty patiently for that. So yeah, do it one more time. Excellent. And then let's try vice versa.
Doesn't know what that is.
Yeah.
I liked it.
He said. I mean, truthfully, both of them are being pretty respectful right now, which is good.
If I were to drop this.
Oh, just like right there.
Well, he didn't see it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've
been a few times where it gets nasty.
Yeah. And what you're gonna do is I want you to hang out at the counter here for a second, and in a minute you're gonna drop the piece off onto the ground. And here's a big rule that I have is if I drop something off my counters, it's not free game for the dogs, right? So if he goes for it because you dropped it off, not because you gave it to him, we're gonna tell him no for that and create a little bit of impulse control with it. And we're not gonna get too wild with simulating all this because they're doing fine with everything we're doing. I'm not trying to push it to the point of a problem because frankly, like there's very few situations you're gonna run into this, you know? And if you're doing a good job of like controlling all of these other situations, like the feeding, if you're handing treats to the dog, stuff like that, the probability something's gonna happen is much lower, right? Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, beautiful.
That look.
Yeah, just that impulsiveness of like, it's on the ground, I gotta go for it. We just wanna get that a little bit better. So every now and then you could just practice a drill like that just to make sure he's staying respectful of that kind of stuff. But if you have that good, where he's not grabbing things when you drop it off the ground, you have them being respectful of each other when you're actually handing out a treat, and they're respectful of each other over feeding time, you've pretty much checked your boxes at that point. A lot of these things piece together, right? He's more compliant, right? So like he doesn't feel like he needs to guard those things as much. So, you know, I always say when you get into guarding of like objects and stuff, 90% of the time, the problem is not that he growled when we took it from him, it's that we couldn't control him around it in the first place. So because you were able to verbally control him and get him to disengage from those objects, He's like, all right, that's just what I do, right? And it's pretty cool how, like, you know, easy some of that stuff is once you have a little bit of control established. You know, like I said, I mean, I'm impressed by everything you guys have been able to do so far with him. You know, even coming in and stuff. Little hiccup getting up, got him back on, no problem. You know, you just gotta keep these routines active, right? Like when you have people come over forever and ever till the end of time, that's how you're gonna handle it, right? That's what I do with my dogs to this day, right? When you go for your walks, that's how you're gonna handle it. And that's really how you know, hit a point where you don't like start to regress after like 2 years, 3 years, stuff like that, is by making sure there's some routines that you always keep consistent, right? I will always feed my dogs the same way. I'll always handle them with guests the same way. I'll always walk them the same way, right? I don't do it that way until they're good, then go back to my old routines, because my old routines are what got me to where I was before, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the biggest thing. And then obviously e-collar use. E-collar is a long-term tool, right? Like you're gonna use it forever, right? You might not need to actually use it forever, but it's gonna be on in the big situations. People coming over, going out and about, or off leash anywhere, right? And as long as you always have it on in those scenarios, you'll rarely ever run into a situation where you're caught off guard and there's nothing you could do about it, which again, causes you to not regress back too much with anything. So you just gotta keep those routines solid. And as long as you do that, there shouldn't be any sort of regression with anything. I mean, you guys done a really great job with them so far.